CPTM open house for the Commonwealth Summit was initiated on Friday to Friday, and it was initiated by the governor of the Bank of Uganda, was on the way to World Bank IMF spring meetings, and it wasn't a coincidence because as far as the value of data is concerned and the digital landscape, the central bank governors within the Commonwealth particularly, they were the most attracted to understand since about 4 years ago to come to terms with concepts and terms which were thrown to them. And as governors at the most senior level, they can't kind of, in a typical conventional context, they can't say they don't know what it is, a cryptocurrency or whatever it is. So they were actually very much engaged into understanding the issues, and by the way of financial inclusion, actually, not just in general come to get a lexicon about digital landscape. While they were dealing with that, obviously the issue of data, which they are very interested not only to monetize and so on, not because it's monetized because of mobile banking and so on, but because they do require statistics real time of a particular kind, which is available if you were to be able to leverage the data that you are accumulating without even realizing or doing nothing about it. So then, of course, national statistics offices, they became kind of, and the chief executive of those offices, they became a party of this ongoing think tanking, and they've been themselves made aware that, or they became aware that they need to reform their way of doing statistics and everything else because of the data and digital landscape. And so on and so on. Bureau of Standards in similar mode because of the, for instance, blockchain technology that at a point of time everybody was crying for a standard for blockchain technology. So the leveraging value of data has a kind of an integrated, interconnected type of framework. Not that is being designed by somebody, but because that's what it is. Otherwise you can do nothing about it. Security is part of it, and I welcome Dato Jazri, Hasni Jazri from Malaysia, is online. Yeah? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us. He's one of the leading experts in cybersecurity. He set up the first cybersecurity institute in developing countries in the Commonwealth. He's now currently in Namibia. So about a year ago, we were trying to see, in addition to the ongoing emerging digital landscape, to see if we could not predict, but we could bring in or spot, as we say, signals of the next after blockchain and so on. So in our group for quite a number of years, we had, in addition to vision exercise, we had this issue of foresight and everything else that, and tools of that nature. But spotting signals for tomorrow, as we have been dealing with for explicitly last year in October, is of a slightly different nature. And we did have in our network in the last few years colleagues like Stephen who will introduce himself, from the Web for Interdisciplinary Research and Expertise, WIRE in short, who from Zurich, who together with his colleagues, they produced in the last quite ahead of the preoccupation on spotting signals to be implemented. They produced what is called abstracts pocket laboratories for the future, which we benefited in the last 7 years. About 10, 15 copies of those had been made available and given to heads of government and to the smart partners during the dialogues. I have one in my hand now, Stephen. It's called The Allure of the New, on the myth of innovation. And like this, now the next stage for WIRE was actually to get involved in developing tools for spotting signals differently from what they did up to now. So Stephen was very kind. We met here in London and we updated each other of the transformation of these tools. And he was very kind this morning to, for about an hour or so, to tell us a bit about spotting signals, which in their terms is called the navigator. So Stephen, and Keith is online. Keith was part of the spotting signals in London in October, including quite a number of Phil Gottlieb, who is here, and Alan Bryden, Andrew Tausig, who is here, our chairman, Sir Martin Lang, who is a fellow. He's here, but he's following us, even if he's not present, but today is present with us. And Mrs. Cunningham, and Dr. Christodoulides, Kit Berdes. These are the people who are at the hub. So, Stephen, please, you go ahead and tell us about rethinking communication and spotting signals.
Thank you so much, Mihaela, for the kind introduction. I'm very happy to have your time for a little bit, for some moments, and give you an overview of what we're doing. As you've heard from Mihaela, we've been dealing with identifying future trends since over 10 years. It usually went in a way that we identified a topic that we thought was interesting, and the goal was always to put it in a larger perspective, and with these abstract booklets kind of show that next to the actual trend, which could be something like automation in mobility, there's a much larger consequence in the environment, with an impact on city planning, with an impact on working models. So it was always the goal to deal with the future in a broader understanding. Now, in the recent, let's say, 2 or 3 years, the dynamic in the market has changed significantly, as we all know, and this has led to a high dynamic in new trends, new technologies, a lot of startups that bring in ideas on how they could change the world. In that context, the challenge for executives or for people responsible in companies or for government has changed, because suddenly there is such a huge complexity of different topics they have to deal with, that the foundation to engage with the future is to get an understanding of what's actually going on. So get a bigger picture, a landscape that allows us to navigate on the one hand, and on the second hand, I think it's actually the goal to be more critical and to look behind on the actual potential of a technological input, because not everything that is possible from a technological point of view will actually turn into an innovation, meaning will have impact on the market. So, long story short, we have been working in the last year on a new tool that is called, as Mihaela mentioned, the Navigator. And what we're doing is actually two things. We're looking at signals in the marketplace. Signals, in our understanding, are initiatives by startup companies, by mid-sized companies, by large companies. So we actually want to see what the concrete ideas, the concrete products and services are that are about to be launched or that could be launched in the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years. And out of that, have a resource to make some predictions on what will actually happen in the market in the near future. At the same time, also being able to look a bit more closely on what the actual potential is, as I mentioned. We've heard all the talks about the blockchain and the revolutionary potential it has. However, if you look at the topics that we have identified, we do not find so many real-world applications where it actually is somewhere close to market. There are a few. I will give you some examples later on. But this is an indication that this is a topic that, of course, has a certain potential, but it will not revolutionize every part of our life in the next 3 years, as some people currently think. So that's the first part of the system. The second one is that we wanted to have a broader understanding of what's going on. And by just screening activities in the market, we, of course, can only see what's going on in the real world, but we cannot see what could be coming, what people could need in, let's say, next 10 years or 15 years. So to get an understanding of what could be needed, we turned the search model around, and we are looking for long-term challenges for economy side. And we do that by expert interviews that we conduct with different people all over the world. And so at the end, we have two foundations. The one is the database with these signals, where we have about 400 signals for every sector. We condense it down to 100 and then to 30 that we actually publish in every sector. We're looking at about 15 sectors, so this is quite a large number of different cases.
Hold a second.
To give a benchmark to understand what's actually going on in the market.
Stephen.
And on the yes.
These signals, are they in the what form?
The signals can be initiated by a startup company. For example, in the US, there's a company in the insurance market. They're called Verifly. Their business model is they're producing insurances that can be sold, that can be used instantly. So if you, in that specific case, have a drone, you want to fly, you push a button, you have an insurance for 10 minutes, and then it's gone. That's an indicator for a signal. Another signal in the construction environment is a new technology that is currently launched by ThyssenKrupp. It's an elevator that is working with magnetic technology, so the elevator can go through a building in three-dimensional spaces. These are two examples of the signal. So very concrete, an example of something that is happening in the marketplace.
Okay.
Good.
Okay.
Just by a little remark on time, we had a misunderstanding when we would start concerning Swiss and UK time. So I will not be able to speak for a full hour. I will concentrate about maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes.
No, that's okay. Actually, others will come in too, so that's okay. Okay.
Very good. Very good. So the sectors that we are currently covering with the tool is healthcare, it's energy, it's banking, it's insurance, it's real estate, it's retail, and there will be many others being added in the year to come. And the idea is that we are currently updating the findings. So with using the navigator, we're actually always on the latest stage of what's going on. We don't believe it's necessary to have an update every week or every month. We believe it's okay to have it every half a year or a year, because at the end of the day, even if we have fast change, the innovations that actually have an impact on the market, they are not that often and that revolutionary. So it's about a year's time when we do the update. Now, to give you an idea on the output, I think it would probably be overwhelming to go through hundreds of cases at this stage. But as mentioned, we are at the same time condensing the different findings on the added values these signals are bringing. And doing that, we have identified 8 different large-scale areas of innovation that we have to think about. First one is, and that does not surprise you, is automatization. That is currently, of course, changing the processes and business models in many industries, ranging from healthcare, where we have automated systems helping elderly people to live independently, where we have algorithms that automatically can help to detect diseases. The second one is personalization. So with a lot of the digital tools, we get the possibility to, based on a better understanding of individual needs, to have a personalization of services and of products. The third area of innovation is virtualization. That is currently one of the largest topics, also driven by new technological inputs by Apple. Also, the augmented reality field is part of virtualization. Then we have another field that we've seen, which we've called design of reality. This is relating to technologies in synthetic biology, CRISPR, but also material design, basically allowing us to substitute existing materials or to find new solutions with actually artificial technologies or solutions that cannot be found in the traditional world. The next innovation field is independent systems. So when we look at real estate, but also in many other areas, there is the goal to decouple interlinked systems, for example, by generating electricity for houses that can be independent of large power generation. We see in many areas ideas that help people to grow their own food, to become independent of the large food chains, and so far. The next one is new technologies for mobility, relating to electro-mobility and other areas where we're heading towards, as many people believe, autonomous transport systems. And that, as I mentioned before, has, of course, also an impact then on larger areas. The next one is decentralization of networks, meaning the blockchain plays an important role. So we're moving away from traditional structures of clear hierarchies in the organization of companies in the direction of more open networks, more flexibility, and that has a large consequence for many of the providers. And the last one is participation. That is used in medicine, that is used in also designing social systems, basically with the goal to increase diversity. Looking at these large fields of interaction, we have also, and I'm sorry, I'm in a train currently, so you will have a little bit of background noise.
The advantage for you is that you are in a Swiss train, which is quite a luxury. But go ahead.
It depends on what area of the train you're in.
That is true.
But I'm entering the better part, actually.
We wish we would be with you, but...
Okay, so I just need a second, I'm sorry. Next to these very general topics that we have identified, it becomes more concrete when we look at concrete developments that are currently on the radar of companies or of public institutions. Yes. And we differentiate between white spots, which are tendency that everybody can see, or blind spots, which are trends that people don't see that much and where we think we should have more attention on. And again, here there is a number of about 30 or 40 of these white and blind spots, and I will focus on a few of the blind spots just to give you an idea. One of the topics that we believe is not being discussed enough still is the bias of artificial intelligence. We currently are under the impression that with smart algorithms we are going to be able to have actual predictive systems that are able to detect new trends or new things that are coming our way. But actually there's always a bias, because the data that is used and the way this process actually influences the outcome. And there are many questions or doubts whether we will actually be able to come up with something as truly predictive, or is it just a representation of our past behavior. And that, of course, influences heavily the way we consume information in newspapers, on how we buy products based on recommendations of things that we've already bought. And what it actually means, it will lead to a homogenization of the product space that we have. We'll find more of the same information. We see it currently in the debates and in the political area, but it also leads to a larger standardization in the product range. To give you an example, if you are a user of Spotify, a music service that provides you with new music based on your preferred preferences, the system will give you ideas on music you like every day for a very low cost. So there's a large advantage. The problem is that it will not differentiate from the competition, because the algorithms are always giving you the choice which is most logical. So Apple Music as a competition system will deliver the same result as Spotify does, the same with systems that give you recommendations, for example, for stocks. So we will find more of the same, and competition is going down. Meaning, if you want to be innovative, if your business model is based on providing something new, algorithms will not help you. They're good for standardized searches and things that you will want in the same areas as you had them before. Another blind spot that has come up in the interviews we've been conducting is the area of data storage. We are currently transforming, as we all know, a large part of our knowledge from libraries and other areas into digital storage devices, but we do not think about that. The average lifetime of these storage devices is limited. So we have an unsolved problem because we will lose the data that we're currently saving. Now, you could argue that there's going to be cloud computing and everything is stored in servers, but also there's a risk that you're going to lose the data. ETH Zurich, for example, is doing research on using DNA as a storage medium, because in DNA you could store a large amount of data for a very long time span, up to 1,000 years, but this is not really on the radar. Another topic of a blind spot that we think is important are taxes. We are currently taxing companies based on their geographic location. And as we all know, with the trend towards virtualization of organizations, this will not be possible in the future, because some companies, as we are seeing it today with Uber and Airbnb and also Facebook, they're working in a geographical environment that they're not situated there. So as a consequence, taxation will move away from a geographical foundation to a transaction-based location. And that again would mean that in Switzerland, for example, all the cantonal taxes, they will move away in the next years. So there's a large topic around the question of income taxes and not to mention the whole gig economy. Maybe one last issue that we found was interesting, which we call fake reality. We are all currently talking about fake news, and which is based on the overflow of data. We are currently developing tools that allow us to manipulate or to change videos, for example, on YouTube very easily. So you can select a picture of a famous person or somebody you know in your environment, and with an algorithm you can analyze facial structures, and you can induce your own movement of your face onto this other person. So you can manipulate what this person is saying. And that means basically that our whole relation towards the real world, where we have trust, where we believe that things are real, that will change maybe quite soon in the next 3 to 5 years. At the time, they're still believing that facial recognition is the key to providing a secure data environment, but we're not so sure that this is the case. So this is just a short overview on some of the topics that I've mentioned. I think it would be overwhelming to go into the single cases. This is something we probably should do another time, or maybe do with providing some of the information. But maybe we can switch into the second part and just discuss questions or issues that you've had when you were listening.
Okay, Stephen. The people who are interested in the kind of signals, and of course the approach we support with signals, and the databases you're making of these signals, there are majority of them companies or also government, or they come from these signal startups and so on, research labs and whatever, but they go to, or they are supposed to be for mainly whom?
We have different companies or institutions we're working with. On the one hand, it's governments. For example, in Zurich, that want to anticipate what the future environment be to adapt regulations in an early stage. So they want to understand which of these technologies, which of those developments could potentially be critical, and where they have to start thinking about new solutions.
Right.
The second one is there's plenty, a lot of companies that are working on similar topics.
Okay.
Many of them not really being overwhelmed with the fast changes, and they want to have an understanding of what's important in the first place, and they also want to have access on the concrete benchmarks and see what's actually going on in their own marketplace, but also look beyond the border and
Okay. Okay. We have a question from Omar from Malaysia, our chairman.
I'm trying to understand what is the difference between your navigation system or navigator system and foresight and future study.
Any other forecasting?
Yeah, the future
As we know
study.
it. Yeah.
What
it's very systematic. We are not the traditional forecasting business, so to say, is based on reports that have identified new trends. So something is coming up and say, well, the blockchain is the thing you have to talk about, and then there's another report saying this is. So our system is a holistic approach, and we are not the ones that, we don't want to be the ones that have to give the trends a certain name, but it's the systematic approach. And it's also, on the one hand, you have the concrete benchmarks, the signals, and then it's transformed into the landscape.
Okay.
So this is something that you do not have. The other reports are mostly, there's single point observations, and then there's maybe a resize, but there's nothing like this holistic system. And the difference is also that our system is being updated continuously. So once you're part of it, you're always on the latest stage.
Just to add to this very quickly, I was listening to some information from the School of International Futures, SOIF, here based in London, and they talk about their activities comprising four steps. They call it scoping, ordering, implication, integrating the futures. So to me it sounds like your navigator system as well. So for us to see what are the real differences, because they say they have got a systematic approach, they use all the analytics and all that kind of a thing. So your navigator system, how is it different and how is it better?
I don't know the other tool exactly, but from the market screening we saw, we haven't seen anything similar.
No.
One thing that probably differentiates, we do not do analytics in a statistical way. I know there's many tools around with crawlers that search the web. Our system is based on quantitative analysis. So we have a team of 6 people that are doing the research, that are taking on the responsibility to identify what's really having an impact and what's not. And it's not just the search of signal, but I can't really give a qualified comparison to the other system, as I don't know the details.
Okay, that's all right. We can. Martin?
Yes, Stephen, I'm fascinated in your area of outputs, but they are what you would call new areas of output, but you don't seem to be getting any input from solving any of the problems which you've already got. Does this mean that people
are they connected?
Are they no longer concerned with the problems of water shortages or food or population growth, these things which have been around for ages? But does that mean there is not enough being done to flag up anything in your technology or your research?
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
On the one hand, yes, I think the focus on innovation today is very much focused on, let's say, solving consumer needs in industrialized societies. At least that's what we see in the signals that we analyze. But there are, of course, plenty of solutions that also go into these existing topics. It is not only that there is, let's call them the new solutions by, providing tailored services for nutrition using DNA analysis. There are also still a lot of solutions that try to cope with the existing problems. But one could argue that, based on the hype of the new technologies, there is a certain distraction from solving the actual fundamental challenges and problems of the world we have today. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, Alan. Alan?
Yeah, I have one question because I'm not sure I heard everything you said. What about biosciences and genetic manipulations? Is that a category that you are monitoring? Because it is for the better and for the worse of humanity. For the better in agriculture, for the worse when it comes with humans.
Absolutely. This is also an area we're covering. We haven't gone through agriculture
Yet.
the research today because we're still setting the system up, but this is actually something we do cover. I mean, in life sciences, it will be about the consequences of CRISPR technologies, for example, that allows us to manipulate genes much more efficiently than we have been doing in the past. And there's, as you mentioned correctly, there's a lot of long-term social challenges that we have, and this is something I haven't mentioned enough maybe before. And this is also something that I would say differentiates our system, because we're not only looking at the direct implications for companies. We're actually trying to build the bridge and identify the long-term challenges for society, which is the reason why we work with the government in Switzerland. And we're actually just on the way to Bern and see the Minister of Communication, because they want to use the system to identify the blind spots in the longer run. So this is something that we are covering as well.
Okay. Keith, you are online. You have any?
Yes, this has been a brilliant presentation, well worth listening to. I guess a broad question for me, which flows on really from your last comment, is the fact you're off to see a politician to discuss this. From an Australian point of view, and I give talks not nearly as sophisticated as yours, but I give talks about the impact of information technology, loss of jobs, etc. Politicians will privately say, yes, I agree with what you've got to say, but I can't talk about this in public. Similarly, of course, to the whole climate change debate, where the Australian government tries to play down the whole problem of climate change.
Yeah.
I'm interested, sir, in the way that you've been able to get politicians to listen to you. How have you been able to achieve that?
Very good question. It's exactly as you're saying. The politicians, they say it's right, but we cannot talk about it. So from a government perspective, they have realized they need channels to inform people about these topics. And so we usually work not with the politicians, we work with the government institutions. And the way on how we try to achieve this is that we are going to produce reports, overviews, that are going to be published, and that will name and identify those future topics. And then the politicians are forced to have to take a stand and have a comment and an idea on how to deal with genetic data, with the risk of algorithms. So this is the way we're trying to go forward to increase clarity, and also to help people understand what's actually going on. Michael has mentioned the blockchain and Bitcoin before, and I think one of the challenges is that hardly anyone does understand what actually is going on, and that's also then the consequence is that we cannot take a stand on potential chances or risks.
Yeah.
So the translation of these topics to a level where everybody can understand, combined with a systematic approach where we can say, look, we believe in 10 years, this might be a topic, but in the next 5 years we have to talk about this kind of takes it away from just identifying topics when something pops up in the media, have a systematic approach that also, in an ideal case, politicians will have to talk about.
I suppose, if I may intervene, actually politicians do listen to media of whatever kind, or do use media of whatever kind. So a kind of spotting signals could go on media, and if, for instance, those who wish to use tweeting, they could be fed with these spotting future trends. They may from time to time also tweet trends of the kind you mentioned rather than other things. I'm talking about what is happening in the media currently. But, Kati, can we keep you another 5 minutes or so?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Maybe I think absolutely it's about to identify the trends, but most of all to see the consequences. Because it is one thing to see, again, automatization as a trend, and then one possible consequence that we've heard about is that people lose jobs. But there are other consequences. There are also chances. And I think, again, for a democracy, take decisions in the longer run, it's important to understand the bigger picture. And so it's not only about the single trend that has to be identified, that's the first step, but it has to be put in context with the consequences for the economy and the society.
Is what you're doing more for the time being in the context of Switzerland or Europe?
No.
And Kat is coming in.
Yes, well, we're trying to screen internationally. So we have plenty of the cases that come from Asia, plenty, of course, that come from the US. I think we also have some African cases, but there is a certain bias. Because what we're looking at are cases that are reported on databases and websites, and we have people that send us input. There's a global screening, and I think it applies easily for every organization that has a bit of an international focus. There is no Swiss bias in it.
No, I mean, it wasn't the bias, it was the constituency. Yeah. Kati, just hold one second.
Okay. What I'm not clear about is whether you are starting, when you're identifying trends, whether you're starting with the demand side or the supply side.
Yes, what?
This is a sort of development of what Martin asked. At the moment, you're obviously you've had to condense an enormous amount into the time available, but at the moment you seem to be ricocheting between the two, and I find it helpful if you said really where your starting point usually is, demand or supply.
Is it demand, supply, or at the same time? I mean, we're still thinking in a conventional approach, but I don't. Could you comment a bit?
Yes, I hope I understood the question correctly. The question is the starting point. And as mentioned before in the beginning, we try to have two approaches. The one is actually by looking at the market. But again, this is limited because we only see what's going on today. And the other approach is that we don't care about the technological advantages that we see today, and where we actually go in a direction where we say the topics that we need to address, and we will also see innovations, are the areas where we have social and economic or individual needs. And with the expert interviews that we're doing, that mostly are the source for these blind spots that I mentioned, we're trying to look at the topic from both sides. So market side, what will come from the pipeline of technology or solutions, and the other side is the demand side. What kind of solutions will we need for our society, for the economy, for the environment?
Okay, two questions. Yeah, Mike, I wanted to ask you, and then Phil, because Mike, you come from IBM. How are you spotting signals currently?
Well, I used to come from IBM.
But when you were in IBM, you're spotting signal. They are still spotting signals.
Yeah, but it was more of a fundamental question. You were talking about ledger and blockchain and when it became mainstream. So I'm seeing across.
A bit louder.
I'm seeing across the landscape that there is obviously a lot of substantial news in the press around Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies.
Yeah.
But underlying that, there's one research in academia, but also certainly within the UK government, on the application of the distributed ledger technology in everything from food provenance to supply chain.
Yeah.
But these are all in development. So
Yeah.
How do you monitor, what's in either academic research or in development? Because once some of these solutions hit the marketplace, then it's going to radically change your view of those technologies.
Yeah, a very good question. I mean, it is quite hard to have a translation from what's going on in fundamental research towards an application. And we decided that we do not monitor fundamental research activities in such a detailed manner as we knew it with the innovation. What we're trying to catch is certain first ideas, but these are situated in the area of, I would say, applied research. So they're always linked to a certain added value that a solution will bring. On the side of the fundamental questions, we would use the other information I mentioned before, because a lot of the basic research at the end of the day is focused around solving very general questions of humanity. And by using that large picture approach, so to say, we try to cover it from that side. But to be explicit, we do not monitor single activities in fundamental research. That would also bring in the complexity that I think we couldn't manage at the time. But I also would say there's a limited benefit from doing that. Okay,
Phil Gottlieb, he was part of a number of chief scientists foresight in relation early on of digital landscape in UK.
Fascinating stuff, Stefan. I've got two very quick questions
yes.
On your blind spots, which have come up in conversation both academically and with clients. The first one is, do you think that AI could ever take a leadership role within a corporate environment? And secondly, do you think we're heading towards what I'm calling a reality of one, and that reality not being constant?
It was the reality of what? I didn't quite.
The reality of one.
That everybody has a different reality.
Exactly.
Different realities.
Each person has a different reality. So there is.
Yes. Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we've learned in recent, let's say, recent 2 years, is that the internet, in the bigger understanding, although it connects every person and every item in the world, leads to a fragmentation of reality, because the algorithms are helping us, are trying to help us to reduce complexity, so they bring us the things that we have been looking at in the past, and this leads to the so-called and much discussed echo chambers or filter bubbles. And so yes, there are parallel universities, and I would argue that with the advent of virtual reality and augmented reality and all these this trend will actually continue. Does that answer the question?
The question was about AI. Would it become leading?
Would AI ever take a leadership role?
No, it will not. I think we are currently, and that's
a relief, yes.
That's a personal opinion based on the things we see. AI will be of tremendous help as a tool in medicine, in transport systems, in taking financial decisions. But out of many reasons, I think we're currently in something like an AI bubble where we overestimate the potential, which is also induced by using the term of artificial intelligence. It's not artificial intelligence, it's actually machine learning. And I think if we use machine learning as the basic term to describe what's going on, it's machines that help us analyze complex patterns, that can reproduce decisions when we have a large amount of data. When we don't have a large database, for example, in medicine where we have similar cases and diseases that not so many people have, it is not a big help. So it is a tool that will help us to take decisions. It will not be a tool that will take decisions, fundamental decisions, new creative ideas on its own, not, at least not in the time where we can foresee in the next 10 years or something. So we should monitor it. We should especially look at algorithms that should be made transparent so that we understand how the information that we get is filtered, by what reasons we get it. But this is the much bigger danger or the challenge that we should look after, rather than something like a Terminator extinguishing human race by superior intelligence or something.
I suppose the navigator is a big picture thing, because and of course it goes through kind of specific spotting specific future signals, but to spot actually signals, you spot them while other things are in development, so you need to be part of it to spot signals of the next. So there is this corollary, yeah? So that's why what is extremely useful, what you said, is gives you a pattern of the big picture, with as far as you can picking up signals, but where probably more algorithmic or other things could happen is if those signals part of development could be accumulated and brought to the attention of the bigger picture. I mean, the artificial intelligence, since about a year ago, we talk about it, particularly in relation to this getting abnormal audits as different from what is a normal audit situation. And then the question becomes, what is a normal audit? Who defined that normal audit? So that through machine learning and artificial intelligence, one can spot the abnormality. So while that further developments are taking place, new signals of new developments will probably be picked up, and they need to become part of the bigger picture, and they will connect with other things. So I think it's the most interesting development. It's not foresight, not forecasting, not anything of what we had up to now. It's real time, but not quite real time, you know, like a picture or whatever, or a film, or is a very interesting area. Anybody online, Keith or Husni, who were part of us from the 11, because I think from about an hour ago.
Number of participants in the meeting is 7 parties in conference.
Other smart partners joined us, but we will need to wind this first part, wind down this first part and initiate the next one. Otherwise, could I ask you, is there any immediate signal that you've been spotting in relation to the value of data in the currently? Because this is the value of data in the digital landscape. Is there anything more important that you could, out of your current?
You mean in the way on how we
data
we collect data,
collect, analyze,
value it.
I think the question,
monetizing it.
It's not so much the question how we collect it or how we store it. The key question with data at the time is actually to come something like a data policy that makes sure that people are in charge of their own data. And we need to identify or develop systems that allow exactly that. So basically, all the data that are being generated are in the possession of the individual owner that can then decide for what purposes or for what institutions he or she will provide that data.
Okay.
It's more. I think the key innovation, to make it, maybe to have a final point, is not so much the single technologies that are being developed. It's much more to transform them into the larger scale innovation that we need, and that is going to be a social innovation. It's not a technological breakthrough of a single technology that will change everything. It's much more the consequences that we need to think about, and that will be the relevant innovation that we should look for.
Okay. Oliver is from a typical digital and foresighted company, Chainvine from Sweden. And do you have anything? You're very preoccupied of picking up signals from all over the place, and you do it in your own way. An immediate thing for useful to Stephen.
Yeah, sorry, I just returned from Amsterdam. So this was a large legal expo on digital data, blockchain, and everything. And I think the law sector has really woken up to this now, and
the legal context.
The legal sector will be looking at this, and the need for standards, the need for governance, and everything around it is only becoming more and more strong. And in fact, most of the lawyers, some of them who were more advanced in digital, were rubbing their hands. The other ones who were not were looking rather scared. That's one take back I can give you from that conference, and it was quite a busy one.
Very special perspective on the legal perspective. Okay, so I suppose Husni is online. and we'll thank you very much, Stephen. But probably
You're welcome.
okay.